We have been following with some interest the saga of a Virginia Democrat by the name of Susanna Gibson. Susanna Gibson, she's a candidate for the Virginia State House. And this week, the Washington Post and the Daily Wire, the two outlets principally and in order who revealed the information, came out with stories that showed that she's actually like a porno lady. She's been making a bunch of porn with her husband. She would accept money from strangers on the internet to produce porn on a publicly available website. And in fact, the videos of her engaged in all of these sex acts are all over the internet. And it wasn't, I guess there wasn't much journalism done on this subject up until now. There wasn't much coverage of it. And then all of a sudden it just exploded into public view. The videos began being deleted just days before the release of the story. And one of the reporters who's been digging into this and has the best coverage on this subject is my next guest. Luke Rosiak from the Daily Wire is here to talk about the saga of Susanna Gibson. Luke, good to have you with us.
Hey, Vince. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so this story, I mean, it's just so crazy in so many ways. Did the media just not dig into it, and you were one of the first to finally, take a bite out of this apple, or what? What happened here?
So what I learned is that the Washington Post, the Associated Press had this story on September 5th and decided not to run it. Instead, they tipped off the candidate, which is why those videos were deleted. So you could say, if you're a journalist thinking about breaking this story, the first thing is it's got to be right. You've got to make sure it's the same person. But when you put an inquiry into her campaign and then hours later those videos disappear from the internet, that's as good as a confirmation that it's the right person.
Yes.
So even though AP had really strong evidence that this story was a slam dunk, they made the decision not to run the story. They killed it. And then eventually they only put up a quick story after other media outlets had already done it.
Sure. And by your description, and by your description here, Luke, even worse than failing to run the story, it seems that they became sort of campaign advisors for Susanna Gibson because they tip her off. She deletes the videos, and they never disclose any of this in public until well after the rest of the press begins covering the story.
Exactly. And I mean, come on, this is an obviously newsworthy story. You've got a candidate running for office who's basically apparently fundraising for her campaign by selling pretty extreme sexual acts. I mean, how is that not a story that you want to write as any journalist if your job is to tell interesting and important stories?
Right. So we've discovered, of course, these videos thanks to your coverage, thanks to the coverage of the Washington Post. And in the aftermath of that reporting from earlier this week, her campaign and her attorney, they began insisting right away that she was the victim of a crime and that Governor Youngkin's team was responsible for wrongly attacking her and spreading what they referred to as revenge porn. Can you help me untangle this?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the lawyer is basically accusing other people of defamation or committing crimes, which, in itself is sort of arguably defamation of the Washington Post to suggest that it committed a crime. They're acting like it was a leak. The news outlets leaked a video. Nobody published this video. What they did is inform voters of the conduct of this woman. I mean, she put the videos online, but I didn't even publish a single screenshot of the videos, much less the full videos, and neither did the Washington Post. So they're not objecting to anyone spreading this actual video. What they're objecting to is people knowing about it.
Right.
An interesting thing happened. So first of all, and it wasn't just because you're exactly right. I mean, the idea that Youngkin was responsible for this seems pretty defamatory to me, and it's not just Gibson that's acting kind of crazy here. It's the head of the Virginia Senate Democrats, Lois Lucas, who also blamed Youngkin. I mean, there's no evidentiary basis for that. So you heard the senior Democrat in Virginia is basically doubling down on her support of this woman and saying we're actually going to help her raise more money because of this.
Now, are all Democrats sticking with her? I mean, she has campaigned with people like Senator Tim Kaine and others. Are they starting to establish some distance from her, or are they holding her tightly as well?
I haven't seen anyone disavow her. I know the Washington Examiner did a story where they asked basically everyone who had endorsed her, like all the different interest groups, if they were still standing by her, and no one said that they weren't. The standard that they seem to be laying down is that she didn't do anything illegal. Like, sure, it might be depraved, it might be, crazy, and obviously not something you would want. By the standards of all of history, this wouldn't be something that you would want to elect someone who had done this. But they're just focusing on, hey, it wasn't illegal. And so that's sort of what the line of inquiry that I pursued with my story today in the Daily Wire, which suggests that it was in fact illegal. I quoted several lawyers in the state of Virginia who say if you look at the prostitution law, taking money from people online in order to perform specific sexual acts with your husband on screen meets the definition of prostitution. Anytime someone is paying you to perform a sexual act, that is what triggers the prostitution law. It doesn't matter if you're not having sex with the person paying you. So even by the standards of, hey, it doesn't matter, it's not a scandal because it's not illegal, it's seeming more and more like it was in fact illegal if you want to be technical about it.
Well, I would imagine that that's the reason why pornography is produced in certain areas of the country, San Fernando Valley, for instance, because it's accommodating to this type of prostitution. But not every state's that way, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's right. Virginia has a pretty strict prostitution law, and you know, the candidate is kind of focusing on, well, she was with her husband in the videos. First of all, in the videos, she talks about having sex with 3 different men in one day and then having sex with her husband at the end of the day and not letting him know, kind of getting off on the fact that he didn't know that she had been with many other people that day. And he expresses that he's not really comfortable with her conduct, but she makes him put up with it. All kinds of weird stuff. But at the end of the day, you know, they're kind of advancing, well, it was with her husband that she was on screen. Who cares? The fact is the prostitution laws are still triggered by the conveyance of money by a third party who's not her husband to induce these sexual acts. Now,
is it just my impression, or has she been lying low since all of this broke? Because I haven't seen any statements from her. I haven't seen anything on social media. She seems to be trying to wait this out.
Yeah, I mean, I think she's, you know, her campaign website hasn't been updated in weeks. I think she's functioning through her lawyer, trying to threaten people and stuff. I think that the fact that it appears to have, you know, meet the standard for prostitution in Virginia is relevant mostly because that's the marker that Democrats have laid down, that it doesn't matter because it's not illegal. There is the question of, could she actually be prosecuted for this? And so I did inquire with the Henrico County Commonwealth Attorney, Shannon Taylor, who would be the person in charge of prosecuting her. Now, Taylor is, like Gibson, a Democrat. So I wondered if maybe that would impact her decision whether to charge or not. I asked her about that, and a funny thing happened. The prosecutor did not get back to me, but 20 minutes after she read my email, I got a call from Susanna Gibson's lawyer, who said he was tipped off that I was working on a story by an anonymous source, a source he wouldn't disclose. So it really raises the question
had you contacted any other person by that point?
Yeah, you know, I had contacted a couple other people, but I don't think, I think, you know, I can't say for certain it was the prosecutor, but the timing strongly suggests that it was. Mm-hmm. And if that's the case, I mean, not only do we have her potentially not being prosecuted because of political considerations, and it's, I think, worse than that, there's some active coordination going on behind the scenes between the prosecutor and Susanna Gibson's lawyer.
Yeah, in a sense, that would amount to that would amount to like kind of an in-kind political contribution here if you're like advising the campaign on your media inquiries and your role as a state prosecutor.
Yeah, exactly. And so it raises the same kind of questions we see in places like Loudoun County with Buda Bivarai, where you see prosecutors that are very clearly motivated far and away first by politics and only secondarily by the application of justice. And it does raise some pretty frightening concerns about civil society.
Another piece here, Luke Rosiak, in this Susanna Gibson saga is, you know, you already mentioned kind of how sad it is for her husband, who expresses, he's a willing participant in this, but he also expresses regret for his wife's behavior. But she's also, as I understand it, a nurse and the mother of a couple of children too, right?
Yeah, and she bills herself as a public health expert. But I got to say, I mean, someone posted a blog article online today saying what a strange job it must be to be a journalist. That you're having people having to watch porn basically for work. But I got to say, I've looked at some of this stuff. It's really raunchy. I wouldn't put it in the category of promoting public health. And it really is some pretty wild stuff, and she's out there selling sort of depraved acts for like these tokens that are literally worth 5 cents. I mean, it's really degrading stuff, and I kind of worry about us as a society if we have reached the point where this doesn't sway anyone's votes. If it's like you can learn this about a candidate, and it's like, well, everyone's just going to vote for the same person they were anyway, because it really raises a question of is there anything that can cause people to kind of evaluate an election based on the quality of the candidates rather than this blind partisan allegiance?
Yeah, no, you wonder. I'm looking forward to a piece of journalism that involves asking all of her patients whether or not she forced them to wear masks when they would visit her. Like, hey, you got to be sanitary. You've got to wear a mask when you come into my office. Meanwhile, she's filming videos sleeping with multiple men in the same day. It is just amazing what you've stumbled upon here. Luke Rosiak, should we expect any more coverage of this saga?
We'll see where it goes. I think it's certainly, as far as campaign bombshells go, I think this is about as wild as you can get.
It is wild. It is totally wild. And the Associated Press, as you noted at the outset, they finally caught up when they saw that you and the Washington Post had given this some coverage. Meanwhile, they were acting as campaign advisors to her campaign when they thought no one else was looking. It's just
and
it's
I
just
can
amazing.
tell you on these videos, I mean, she wanted people to see this. She said, and I love that they're all watching me getting, and I can't say this next part on the radio, it turns me on. I want to see you on Checkmates too. So she's putting this out there for her thousands of followers and trying to get even more followers to watch it.
Hey, one other thing I know in your coverage today, you just reminded me of some of the stuff she's saying in these videos. She did say at one point in one of these videos that she was prepared to make it so that a hotel worker would arrive at her room and she would answer the door naked in order to see their expression and catch it on camera or something like that. You spoke to some legal experts about the arrangement that she described, correct?
Yeah, I mean, that could potentially be indecent exposure or maybe worse. I mean, this would be she was getting a sexual thrill out of, and her viewers were getting a sexual thrill out of this poor woman or man who works for the hotel knocking on the door and saying, I've got room service, and she would say, come in. And then this poor person who didn't want any sexual contact or to see any of this sexual stuff, kind of against their will, would just walk into this crazy sex scene.
Yeah, that seems like, for most of us, that would be a crime. That's like a textbook crime. You don't have to be an attorney to assess that, I think. Thank you very much. Luke Rosiak over at the Daily Wire, great reporter at a great site. Really appreciate it, sir.